The Shrine of Shadows. It was the dead of night, a time when the world seems to hold its breath. A thin layer of mist clung to the ground, and the moon, half hidden behind thick clouds, offered little light. The sound of distant rustling leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl were the only interruptions in the eerie silence. A group of 5 explorers stood at the edge of the forest, staring at the dark silhouette of a crumbling shrine, barely visible through the trees. This is it? Whispered Sarah, her voice trembling as she pulled her jacket closer. The cold seemed unnatural for this time of year. Yeah, this is the place, replied Marcus, the leader of the group. His face was hardened by years of exploring the unknown, but even he couldn't hide the unease creeping into his expression. I've heard stories about this shrine, said Greg, the youngest in the group, nervously adjusting the straps of his backpack. People say it's cursed. No one who comes here at night ever returns. Superstitions, scoffed Claire, trying to sound confident, though her eyes darted nervously around the shadows. It's just an old shrine. Nothing more. The 5th member, Ethan, stayed silent, gripping his flashlight tightly. His knuckles were white, and his breathing was shallow. He had been the one who found the shrine's location deep in an ancient book of folklore, but now he wished he hadn't. There was something deeply unsettling about this place. The group entered the forest, their flashlights casting long, twisted shadows as they moved closer to the shrine. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Every step felt heavier, like the very air was pressing down on them. This path doesn't feel right, muttered Sarah, her voice barely above a whisper. I swear it wasn't this narrow when we came in. Keep moving, Marcus ordered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. As they approached the shrine, a sudden gust of wind blew through the trees, extinguishing Claire's flashlight. She cursed under her breath as she fumbled to turn it back on, but it refused to cooperate. Here, use mine, Greg offered, handing her his spare flashlight. Claire took it with a nod of thanks, but as soon as she flicked it on, the light flickered and died. What the hell? Claire muttered, shaking the flashlight. None of these should be failing. I just replaced the batteries this morning. It's this place, Ethan said quietly, his voice shaking. It doesn't want us here. They finally reached the shrine, a decaying structure covered in moss and ivy. It looked older than time itself, with stone steps worn smooth by centuries of neglect. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something rotten. This is it, Marcus said, stepping forward. Let's get this over with. As they ascended the steps, the temperature dropped even further. Their breath came out in white puffs, and the cold seemed to seep into their bones. At the top of the steps, they found a large, wooden door, half-rotted and barely hanging on its hinges. I don't like this, Greg whispered. Something's not right. We've come this far, Marcus replied, pushing the door open with a loud creak. We're not turning back now. The inside of the shrine was dark and musty, the air stale with the scent of decay. The walls were lined with ancient statues, their faces twisted in grotesque expressions, as if frozen in eternal agony. The explorers' footsteps echoed unnervingly in the vast, empty space. What are we even looking for? Claire asked, her voice bouncing off the walls. Anything that proves the legends are true, Marcus said. Artifacts, symbols, anything. As they moved deeper into the shrine, a strange feeling washed over them. It was as if they were being watched, the hairs on the back of their necks standing on end. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of their vision, but whenever they turned to look, nothing was there. Guys, did you hear that? Sarah suddenly whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The group stopped, straining to listen. At first, there was only silence. But then, faintly, they heard it, a soft, raspy whisper, like the wind passing through dead leaves. It's just the wind, Marcus said, though his voice wavered. No, Ethan whispered, his eyes wide with terror. It's not the wind. It's them. Them? Claire asked, her voice shaking. What are you talking about? The spirits, Ethan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. This shrine, it's not just cursed. It's a prison. A prison for the souls of the damned. Before anyone could respond, the whispering grew louder, filling the room with a chorus of unintelligible voices. The explorers huddled together, their flashlights flickering wildly as the temperature dropped even further. Their breaths came out in short, panicked gasps as they realized they were not alone. Suddenly, the statues along the walls began to shift. At first, it was subtle, a slight movement of the head, a twitch of the fingers. But then, one by one, they started to turn towards the group, their stone eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. "We need to get out of here," Greg shouted, his voice breaking as he turned to run. But the door they had entered through was no longer there. The walls seemed to have shifted, trapping them inside the shrine. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. "They won't let us leave," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "They're going to take us, just like they took the others." "Shut up," Marcus yelled, grabbing Ethan by the shoulders. "We're getting out of here. We just need to, ***. But Marcus's words were cut short as something cold and clammy wrapped around his ankle. He looked down in horror to see a bony hand, protruding from the floor, gripping him tightly. He screamed as he tried to pull away, but the hand only tightened its grip, dragging him down. "Help me!" Marcus screamed, but the others were frozen in terror as more hands emerged from the floor and walls, reaching for them. Sarah and Greg were the next to fall, their screams echoing through the shrine as they were dragged into the darkness. Claire and Ethan stood back to back, desperately trying to fight off the hands that clawed at them. "This can't be happening," Claire sobbed, swinging her flashlight wildly. "This can't be real." But it was real. The hands were relentless, pulling them down, one by one. Claire's screams were cut off as a hand covered her mouth, silencing her forever. Ethan was the last one left, tears streaming down his face as he watched his friends disappear into the floor. "Please," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Please, let me go." But the shrine had no mercy. The last thing Ethan saw before he was dragged into the darkness was the statues, their twisted faces grinning in sadistic pleasure. And then, there was silence. The shrine stood alone once more, its ancient walls echoing with the screams of the damned. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of lost souls, forever trapped in the Shrine of Shadows. No one would ever find the explorers. Their fates would remain a mystery, just like the countless others who had ventured into the shrine before them. The legends would continue to grow, warning future generations to stay away. But the shrine would always be there, waiting patiently for its next victims.
Don't forget to subscribe.